Envoy of Lights presents Lopsided Minds, Part 1, The Illusion of Coherence, written and spoken by Dr. Shawn Shahmoradian.
In the name of the omnipotent, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, omnitemporal, and omniscient God, the most merciful, the most gracious, and the most compassionate, the eminence, the proprietor of patient, space, time, and beyond, the fiduciary, the adjudicator, custodian, and the high judge, the umpire of all there is and the non-existence, the holder of the truth, justice, and equity in the name of the Almighty God. This literary work yields verities, accuracy, and integrity. The counsel is awe-inspiring. The canon of coherence and reason prudently orates on the nature of existence. The opus, the masterpiece, this quick-witted, astute academic journey thoroughly investigates the whole axiom, veracity, and the presence, being vitality of its scientific and philosophical claim. Presented also in a speech in the form of a podcast to manifest diversity in professional delivery, barren of any mental toxicity, devoid of fabrication, not fertile for polluting minds, but to clarify, to declare, to dedicate the truth, to categorically denounce the atheist's claim, unthinkingly repudiating the infinitely resourceful God, profoundly searching for answers to the most intriguing, interesting questions, and venturing on fascinating adventures. Emprise trial or action. The work, the task, insightfully examines theories and doctrines to identify what makes sense, seeking all that stands to logic and insisting on addressing the truth without bias, devoid of bigotry. This book and this podcast address subjects central to our lives, including philosophy, science, psychology, sociology, anthropology, biology, chemistry, economics, physics, quantum mechanics, the invisible domain, string theory, parallel universes, the origin of life, and other vital contexts and valuable rarities. Uniqueness. The volume emphasizes understanding the universe, nature, and human fallibility, weakness, while contemplating the puzzling perspective of our world and seeking convincing, eloquent, potent answers to intricate questions. Studying the physical world, the mental and spiritual realm, and whether there is a God, delving into decisively essential subjects. To understand the universe, one must investigate nature's mysteries and seek which elements support the cosmos without resorting to mythological inconsistencies or augmenting novels, fantasy fable. Hence, one must understand what the opponent and the advocate say in any worthwhile discussion, as complex matters should not be taken lightly. The rivals' arguments should explicitly explain the fundamentals. A make-sense debate should convey a harmonious, adeptly correlated alliance, maintain a peaceful atmosphere, and be delivered purposefully and professionally. The lecture and discussion should be conducted with mutual respect, fostering transparency and candor to ensure that deliberation is perceived as relevant. The discourse should be logically sound and cerebrally convincing. The debate should occur without conflicting statements and concocted, put together as illuminating as possible to delineate, present, deliver, depict a thorough and sensible lecture to betoken auspicate good luck, a proper, admirable correspondence, and satisfying answer. The rhetoric. The monologue should convey explicit and pertinent agendas. For example, in discussions about topics such as deity, if there is a God, atheism, existence, science like physics, chemistry and biology, economics, philosophy, psychology, the afterlife, quantum mechanics, black holes, dark matter, dark energy, the origin of life, the Big Bang, artificial intelligence, astrology, parallel universes, wormholes, evolution, philosophy, artificial intelligence, consciousness, DNA, forensic science, culture, art, history, ideology, religion, law, or other key concepts and decisive subjects, sometimes as complex as they are, inference, this thesis, logic, reasoning must prevail. Participants should thoroughly understand the content, ensuring it is cogent and accurate. The interaction, the conference, and the essay should convey a culture of sound thinking, not one immersed in illusion, nonsense, and irrationality. Yet one should be able to discern and eloquently, persuasively capture adequate views. The theme, the topic, the thesis is not only presented as a half-truth, but also used to make all-inclusive communication efficient and rational, to mindfully employ nature's essence and investigate the universe's gist, the quintessence, or appreciate the ethos, spirit, to arrive at conclusive amity, harmony. The expounder, apostle proponent, should be conscious of the cosmic infinite intricacies, a finely structured and tuned universe. One should be aware of the unbounded celestial soul to reference the glorifying fabric of the whole endless being, as much as it is unveiled to humanity, not only confined to laboratory work alone, but also authenticated with rich evidence and presented with radiant dialogue, affirming the exalted, the dignified, the noble universal's interaction, so limitlessly dynamic and astronomically mystifying, to excavate and open tunnels to the root cause of the information in our universe, to divulge the secrets that can gradually be disclosed, to fathom the kindled cosmos and awakened creation, in which one must acquire the cardinal, premier, primary, constitutional kinetics, to venture into the locomotion, the direction of reality, and not to stray from certainties, warding off, averting from the cosmic certitude. Rather than merely using superficial characters, one should insightfully avoid and prevent the intention of offering skin-deep, surface-level activities that suggest the soul facet, the appearance of things, but to seek the viable, the underpinning, the understructure of nature. Since the world is in constant flux, it is very challenging to grasp the cosmic, the universally enigmatic setting, comprehend its baffling positions and sophisticated pattern, and realize its profound essence, since this is an awe-inspiringly meandering road. This winding territory must be approached with caution and great wisdom. Disclosing the secret of the universe is prone to misperception, misinterpretation, and miscalculation. They can be extremely slippery, misjudge, and misgauge. Our insights are often shaped by fleeting moments and by reliance on surface appearances, which can obscure facts and hide the truths, resulting in gridlock, congestion, a quagmire, and a hazy presentation that implies deception. The mechanics should prompt us to pause and seek a deep, meditative understanding rather than falling into simple-mindedness, and to arrive at a conclusive theory or doctrine about falsehood rather than authentic facts, as many atheists become entrapped because they do not contemplate the facts, not meditate or focus on the highly wise-ventured nature and its intelligently functioning outlook. This ruminative, or thoughtfulness approach transcends the immediate state and interactions to focus on the literal performance and to acknowledge the myriad countless factors responsible for a decisive universal mission. Not obvious, not revealed to the naked eye, sometimes even concealed to advanced magnifiers, screened, shielded, guarded to sophisticated contemporary telescopes such as the globally known James Webb Space Telescope. It is imperative to foretell and articulate a proper and worthy answer, since the discourse should convey explicit and relevant objectives. The debate or presentation ought not to be a garrulous, talkative, chatty diary lined up with empty rhetoric, as if the contrarian, adversary, or entrance partakers are hallucinating. It is not desired to deliver incredulous, falsified, doubtful lectures which imply bias and prejudice, rendering disparity and vague notions, and denote pointless chat and wishful thinking. History can testify to many so-called doctrines and theories that initially seemed proper and correct, but were later perceived as delusional, not worthy, forgotten, lost from view, or remembered as absurd, and eventually discarded, discredited, buried in the past, and for a good reason too. For example, over thousands to millions of years, countless artifacts and exhibits of artificial gods and false icons, idols/images, have been found, indicating that humans have worshipped them. Or lectures in manufacturing, wrong deities attempting to present fake gods as facts, but utterly failing, like a bucket with many holes not holding any water. Because the human brain is the only organ that continues to grow through neuroplasticity, seeking knowledge to improve through learning, to accept what is thoroughly bona fide, to discard ideological fictions, and to detect lies. Just a simple contextual review of history from thousands and millions of years ago should awaken Professor Dawkins to spur, to poke Paul Lurtz, Professor Peter Atkins, a chemist from the University of Oxford, Professor Daniel Dennett, an American philosopher and cognitive scientist centered on the philosophy of the mind, the philosophy of biology related to evolutionary process, Professor Lawrence Krauss, a Canadian physicist, Sam Harris, a neuroscientist, philosopher, the late Professor Stephen Hawking, awarded by the Cambridge Union Society to recognize the professor's significant contributions to science, technology, and social discourse, a scientist and a physicist. The late Christopher Hitchens, a renowned author and journalist, and the rest of the flock to learn about. The variety of false deities and how the fake gods and their existence have arrived, been forgotten, and been discarded into the garbage disposal of history, which apparently includes modern atheist doctrines as well. This time, modern materialists, rather than statues or sculptures or a statuesque, majestic, regal entity of gods. Today's scientists, as named above, announce the physical laws of the universe as God or nature, illusioned into believing they have scientifically sought and finally found the true God, forgetting that no laws create anything, since laws define things, They manifest rules and regulations, for example, the constitutional laws or unlimited other maxims, mottos, theories, or laws. They absolutely do not create, design, build, or construct things. They are instructional. They renders definition, order, and disciplines to be followed or mandated. Hence, persuading the same roads of baseless claims, empty rhetorical fancies, surmise, guessing hunch, and imaginative wishful thinking that should be discarded, because all theories or any creed, any ideological principle should identify with reason, rational, and convincing judgment. They must resonate with correct events, proper causes, and effects. The purpose is to elucidate further the marrow of what non-believers generally express, and why some atheist scientists, philosophers, and several schools of skepticism are mistaken. They have behaved as the umpire of fiction, delusional about their so-called scientific and philosophical perspectives on why there is no God. Still renowned for what they do for a living, but lost in their analytical views about the universe, existence, and referencing deity, acting with undue haste and irrational exuberance in their vain mission, denying God. In the modern age, figures such as the late Professor Stephen Hawking, the cream of the crops of atheists, Friedrich Nietzsche, Richard Dawkins, Peter Atkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, Lawrence Carus, Danielle Dennett, Bertrand Russell, Jean-Paul Sartre, Carl Sagan, an American astronomer and planetary scientist, Auguste Comte, French philosopher and mathematician and writer, Marx, Friedrich Engels, Ludwig Feuerbach, a German philosopher and anthropologist, John Dewey, highly influential American philosopher, psychologist, and educational reformer, drafting doctrines that refute an infinitely intelligent designer, a marvelous creator, only to be proven wrong, yet without learning any lesson. The objectives are to indicate that the absence of God and morality, empty of virtue, in an environment where money is above God, has brought so much pain and suffering to humanity. Unless humanity tilts toward the omnipotent, omnipresent, and omnibenevolent, omnitemporal, omniscient God, we should expect an even more catastrophic environment, a culture of crimes, devastating violence, where no one will ever be safe again. And the imperative point to mention is that some atheist scientists and certain non-believer philosophers unreasonably emphasize that science is the answer to everything and all there is. However, contrary to their purportedly, evidently, assumably, cogent assessment that science is the answer to everything, science has illuminated numerous innovations and a rich track record that leads to the footprints and traces of the Almighty God beyond imagination, because what once seemed impossible is enlightening humanity, leading to fantastic architecture and unbounded intelligence, CEO, a remarkable superintendent, and an omnipotent deity. The heretics do not fathom that an immaculate mind is sustaining the universe and the whole existence through the umbilical cord of knowledge, reason, order, accuracy, veracity, truth, surveillance, and unbounded intelligence. Here I will try to divulge, to reveal why several atheist schools of thought are wrong, not excluding the heathen scientists and philosophers as well. With the atomists, historically, atomism is among the earliest non-theistic or non-supernatural explanation of so-called reality, 5th century BCE, which did not posit a creator God. Leucippus, Democritus, and Epicurus in which the atomists influenced other atheists or non-believing successors, the heirs or the inheritors, the beneficiaries, with somewhat erroneous, inaccurate views referencing the non-existence of the Almighty God. The following is the historical progression, focusing on doctrines that did not require a creator God. The umpire of fictions. Then it was sophistry, 5th century BCE, Protagoras and Gorgias. Skepticism, 4th to 3rd century BCE. Key figures: Pyrrho, Sextus Empiricus. Epicureanism, 4th to 3rd century BCE. Key advocate Epicurus. Stoic materialism, 3rd century BCE. Zeno Chrysippus. Naturalism, Hellenistic period, relating to the widespread Greek-based culture that developed after the conquest of Alexander the Great. Renaissance materialism, 16th to 17th century. Mechanistic materialism, key figures: Hobbes, Lamartine. Empiricism, 17th to 18th century. Key figures: John Locke and Hume. Positivism, 19th century. Key figures: Auguste Comte. Darwinism, Charles Darwin. Marxism, key figures: Marx, Engels, and Lenin. Existentialism, key statistics: Nietzsche, 19th century and early 20th century. Sartre, Kierkegaard, Heidegger, Albert Camus, and Simone de Beauvoir, French female writer. Contemporary physicalism and new atheism: Stephen Hawking, Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, Lawrence Krauss. Empiricism holds that genuine knowledge arrives from sensory experience, observation, measurement, experience. John Locke, George Berkeley, and David Hume are classified as moderate empiricists, radical empiricist Hume, and moderate empiricist John Locke. The problem with the empiricist unbelievers is that the very senses they proclaim as decisive in making sense of the world are not tangible, not seen, not measurable. They cannot be observed, then so unreasonably utter, "Show me God." Agnosticism. Agnostics believe the existence or non-existence of God is unknown or possibly unknowable. I will delve deeper into the categories of non-believers to explain why they appear delusional and unrealistic, as they challenge the subtlety of the centripetal affinity inward force of cogency, thereby undermining the refinement of reason and credibility. From the dawn of time, every philosophy, every doctrine, or so-called theory that sought to reduce existence to matter has ultimately reached a dead end, dried and wilted. The deeper our understanding grows, the more reality reveals itself as energy, information, and intelligence, pointing not to blind atoms, but to a deliberate mind behind the universe. Since humanity first opened its eyes to the world, material explanations for existence have risen and fallen, vanishing quietly like a shadow. Yet understanding rooted in energy, intelligence, and divine mind has endured, indicating that the ultimate cause of all things is not matter but God. From ancient myth to modern physics, every attempt to reduce existence to mere matter has ultimately collapsed under its own weight. What remains standing is the insight that reality is shaped by energy, mind, and a transcendent brilliance, the all-knowing divinity that humanity has always called God. The atheists have manufactured limitless gods, trying to structure beliefs through superstitious and fake deities, which, as science and philosophy advanced, withered, dwindled, and eventually disappeared. Examples of such gods are as follows: the sun god, the moon god, the storm gods, the lightning gods, the rain god, the river gods, the volcano and the fire gods, the earth and fertility goddesses. Scientific understanding of astronomy, weather systems, progressive meteorology, geology, and biology supplanted mystical descriptions, the paranormal transcendent explanations, and reject fictitious gods. Moreover, animals are regarded as gods or as divine embodiments, such as the Egyptian cat goddess Bastet, the falcon head, and the Hindu cow. They faded away as the science of zoology and anthropology advanced. Ancestral or human rulers as gods. Many societies once believed in powerful kings or chiefs, and our ancestors were regarded as gods or semi-divine beings. Egyptian pharaohs, Roman and Japanese emperors, Greek and Persian ancestors, and African ancestors were considered as gods. They faded away due to political evolution, rationalism, and secular governance. Their superstitious outlook on God rendered divine kingship obsolete. They accepted idols of artificial objects as gods. People worshipped carved statues made of mud, wood, copper, gold, silver, and other materials, seeing them as actual gods, as sacred deities such as Mesopotamian idols means the land between the rivers. In ancient Greece, the term Mesopotamia referred to the region between the Tigris and the Euphrates River, primarily in modern-day Iraq, is known as the cradle of civilization. Fertility figures, holy stone, etc., Greeks, Romans, and pre-Islamic, Indians, Oriental, and Chinese temples filled with artificial idols which were quite sacred to them. Seeing cosmic bodies and celestial objects as gods, stars and constellations, groups of stars that form recognizable patterns, traditionally named after their apparent forms or identified with mythological figures, are considered gods. Planets regarded as divine, such as Mars, Venus, and Jupiter. Many people saw the Milky Way as a spiritual realm. The sciences of astronomy and physics reveal the stars as physical objects rather than divine beings. A mythological hybrid is the offspring of two plants or animals of different species or varieties, such as a mule, a hybrid of a donkey and a horse, or a being with human and animal forms, such as a dragon-like deity. Alien or astral gods. As science grew further, people began to speculate that gods were extraterrestrial or advanced beings. As human intelligence progressed, the idea of God shifted from matter to form, to nature, to rulers, to symbols, to mythological perception, to cosmic concept, culminating in pure consciousness. Our ancestors looked outward to understand what stirred the heavens while focusing on the earth. In every corner of the ancient world, humanity projected its fears, hopes, and mysteries onto the nearest powerful force. Thus, The first gods were not associated with wisdom, but with forces of matter, such as the sun, storms, mountains, and rivers, even volcanoes, until we reached an era in which we began to develop preliminary science and philosophy. For instance, the atomists, the Greek philosophers like Leucippus and his student Democritus, Epicurus, setting the groundwork, the foundation of new atheism, to eventually arrive at the modern contemporary non-believers, such as late physicist Professor Stephen Hawking, Bertrand Russell, biologist Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, Christopher Hitchens, and neuroscientist Sam Harris, often called the Four Horsemen, and others. Moreover, many vainly, to no purpose, pointless schools of thought influenced by atomists began to hold that existence consists of atoms and the void, that creation is governed by a material being, since matter is the creator of existence. In the contemporary era, some scientists and philosophers place undue, excessive weight on science, exaggerating its importance. At the same time, we should not overlook the remarkable nature of science. But science cannot answer many of the questions that are decisive in our lives. They are tempting inquiries such as, is there a God? Where do we come from? Who are we? Why are we here? Are we extraterrestrials? Where are we going? Should the souls of the upholder, the righteous, be treated as the evildoers after we die? If there is heaven and hell? Are we living in a matrix? What is the meaning of life? What is the origin of life? Why do we persist in procreation? Why do we love? Why do we sacrifice? Why do human beings murder? If the beasts kill because they are famished, they eliminate the weaker prey to survive, whereas humans often kill for no reason. Is there a difference? Are we better than the brutes, barbarian savages, or worse? Are the ogres, Hulk, the beasts that devour victims, at fault because they are starved? Are the wild, fierce quadrupeds, animals that kill for survival, guiltier than those who commit genocide, murdering innocent people, or force wars of aggression, and regard the sufferer as collateral, incidental damage? Why is there so much hurt in the world? Are we the image of God, the portrayal of Satan, or both? Why do so many people present themselves differently in public than they really are? The world is a theater, and humans are actors and actresses. Who are we really? Socrates said, "Know thyself." But how can we know ourselves? Do we have something to do with people's appalling situation? Or is God causing the gloomy, miserable conditions? Are we refugees on earth? Are humans exiled from the other universes in an exodus, migration manner from auxiliary extra realms? Is mind or matter responsible for creation? What is consciousness? Where is consciousness? Do our senses lie to us? Is the physical world real? Are there parallel universes? Why do the unseen activities, like the function of our mind, intelligence, memories, thoughts, imagination, dreams, ingenuity, IQ, talent, creativity, hope, behaving optimistically or acting pessimistically, and other feelings and emotions influence what we do? How does it happen? What are the procedural dynamics? And why is our action the result of our unseen conscious behavior? Why do our senses and curious minds scour, cleanse, polish, acting as reconnaissance, exploring many staggering subjects? Why are we interested? Why curious? Why inquiring? Why is the human psyche so complex? A marvel of intricacy. Do you believe in your mind? If so, what is it? If one's mind exists, why not see it? If we see the traces of God and comparably see the traces of our mind, not seeing the mind as we do not see the Almighty, we do not see the Supreme Deity, only noticing God's effects and noticing only the result of man's thoughtfulness and intelligence, then what is the difference? If we are, where are we? In our brain, in our neurons, in our prefrontal cortex, in our heart, our lungs, kidneys, aorta, in our veins, in any organ at all, in neurotransmitters, in our bones, bone marrow, muscles, anywhere inside, where are we? Are we the only creatures with the outside body experience? Are we an undeniable part of the universal consciousness? As the saying goes, the whole is made of the sum of its parts. Are we in our body, in our mind, or in our spirit? If our mind's effects are noticed, why is the result of the unseen God questionable? Perceiving, imagining the infinite impact of the majestic work of God on presence, reality, existence, which is comparable to an ocean, to a drop of man's mind on life. What fuels thousands of technologically imperative gadgets like microchips, GPS, GPT, digital computers, complex telescopes, internet, smart TVs, smartphones, musical instruments, self-driving cars, artificial intelligence, robotics, automation, X-rays, MRI, EEG, EKG, radar oscillators, DNA profiling, antibiotics, penicillin, genetics, forensic sciences, etc. What guarantees their conductivity and intelligence? Their practicality, making our lives easier. The unanimity of such queries will be understood as reflecting converging thoughts that crystallize into focalizing notions and polarizing opinions. The nature of such probes and unlimited others is beyond the scope of science to deal with rationally. The method, scientific data, is not well suited to advocating such matters cogently and coherently. What we know so far is that there are only two options. Either matter caused the entire existence, the universe, the cosmos, and beyond, or the mind. A principle of modern science known as the anthropic principle, which emerged in 1980, posits that human existence is not accidental or chosen. It suggests that the universe is finely tuned for existence. Constants and conditions are adequately set, positioned for life. They are exact. Believing otherwise invalidates all laws of physics, chemistry, conservation, angular momentum, and every other scientific law at work. The atheists do not fathom, they do not get it, that the universal laws, the constants, are planted in the womb of nature. They are fixed values that cannot be compromised and will never change. Constants such as speed of light, gravity. Planck's constant says that energy is not continuous but comes in tiny discrete packets called quanta. It sets the most minor scale at which energy can be exchanged. In essence, it tells us that nature is grainy at the deepest level, not perfectly smooth or continuous. Electromagnetic charge is a fundamental property of matter, for example, electrons and protons, that interacts with electric and magnetic fields, producing forces such as attraction and repulsion, and occurs in two types, positive and negative, charges come in two types: positive protons and negative electrons. Opposite charges attract and like charges repel. Cosmological constants, the weak and strong atomic forces, and others, they make the universe what it is and stable. The infidels do not grasp that if any constant were to change slightly, the universe would collapse, explode, or never form structures. For example, if gravity were stronger, stars would burn out instantly or collapse into black holes. If gravity were weaker, stars and galaxies would never form. If the electromagnetic force were slightly different, atoms would not hold together. These constituents, component elements, maintain a delicate balance, thereby stabilizing the whole being. The relationship between constants determines the size of atoms, determines how electrons orbit, determines how molecules form, determines how the chemical reaction changes work. If these constants change by even 1%, atoms could become unstable or all chemistry could fall apart. The constants govern the behavior of time, space, and light. See, for instance, the speed of light, see, sets the limit on information transfer and shapes the structure of space-time. Planck's constant defines the quantum world and controls how particles behave. Bear in mind that particle behavior was irrelevant to atomists. Without fixed constants, physics would be chaotic and unpredictable. Einstein's relativity formula would never have been formulated, and numerous other imperative scientific innovations would have been impossible. They allow the stars to shine. The fusion of stars depends on the precise balance among gravity, the strong nuclear force, and electromagnetic repulsion. A tiny difference would stop stars from shining or forming. The constants make life possible. Life depends on stable molecules. It depends on stable stars providing a steady energy source. Life depends on stable atoms. The constants enable the universe to operate in an orderly manner without complexity or chaos. Without the constant, the entire universe will be short-lived. The atheists want us to believe that these laws and countless others that have sustained the cosmos for an infinite era beyond what we can imagine were formed by chance, by accident, positioned randomly, made from dull, unintelligent, blind, insensitive, and destructible localized matter. A notable feature of Earth is that it moves rapidly. It rotates at about 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, and orbits the galaxy with the solar system at about 500,000 miles per hour. Yet we do not feel it. Because it operates at a constant speed, it has smooth motion, much like a smooth flying airplane. Earth orbits the Sun at a speed of 67,100 miles per hour, 30 kilometers per second, which is equivalent to traveling from London to New York in about 3 minutes. Imagine that the constant speed fluctuates slightly. Nothing can survive at that rate. The atheists believe that such an extraordinary deed, such a master stroke, a miraculous feat, occurs without reference to a designer or any intelligent agency. The non-believers argue that the physical laws of the universe gave rise to what we know as existence, saying matter always existed. This claim is not science, it is metaphysics. There is no empirical evidence that matter is eternal. We know it is destructible, cannot exist everywhere, and is not prevalent. There is no strong cosmological evidence for the beginning. Consequently, to claim that matter has always existed is utterly unreliable. Matter explains how things change, but it cannot explain why anything exists at all. Matter did not create existence. To believe that, those particles assembled themselves into laws, intelligence, morality, mission-driven fine-tuning of the universe and consciousness, then somehow woke up and began asking questions about their own origin is absurd. It is the most sophisticated myth humanity has ever invented. Every atom depends on laws it did not create. Constants cannot change. Order it cannot defy. The order cannot be explained. Mathematical laws, numbers and forms, no one can say where they came from or when they appeared. Since they are invisible, not tangible, cannot be heard or tasted, and are only orderly, meaningful, and comprehensible. Some regard them as the language of God. They must have existed forever, since without them, no order can be maintained, no balance can be calculated, and no universally dependent function can be managed. Proving that, contrary to the atheist's assessment, existence requires non-material sources, non-material characteristics, timeless, necessary, powerful, omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, omnitemporal, and omnibenevolent, rational, unboundedly intelligent, and conscientious. It is outlandish, grotesque, so weird that the atheists refuse to see that no laws create anything. The laws explain things, they do not make them. There must be a lawgiver to make laws and to produce rules. They do not realize that if the universe were not mathematically tuned, calculable, and highly conscious, no science would ever be established. They think we live in a vacuum, exhausted by an infinite atmosphere of sensibility, an environment highly conductive and never insulated, which encourages scientists to continue their valuable work. Furthermore, if the universal operating knob is turned slightly, everything will stop working. One can expect a total disaster and annihilation, since the whole universe becomes uninhabitable, hostile, too chaotic, and devoid of light to sustain itself. Most atheists accept an explanation for the origin of life known as abiogenesis because they do not rely on a supernatural cause or metaphysical perspective. Abiogenesis is the scientific theory describing how life arose from non-living matter, such as simple organic compounds, through gradual chemical evolution into self-replicating systems and early cells on primordial, prehistoric Earth. If so, the primordial soup is essential. A viable atmosphere is required, and given the hundreds of other variables needed for such a strange apparatus to occur, such a complex mission can't happen remotely, devoid of a viable, enriched environment supporting such dynamics. When referring to organic compounds, it is said that they evolved gradually into self-replicating systems and early cells on primordial, prehistoric Earth. The atheist biologists, the scientists, and the physicists so cunningly and surprisingly camouflage the influence of extremely vital variables, the potent atmospheres, on the entire mechanism. This is a rather complicated interaction. It cannot have been isolated without being fed by a variety of essential factors, predominantly and without guidance. Earth formed roughly 4.5 billion years ago. Simple life appeared 3.5 to 4 billion years ago, not as bacteria already formed, but as elementary self-replicating molecules. They believe the early ocean contained simple chemicals. These chemicals reacted under heat, lightning, minerals, and other conditions. Gradually, molecules formed that could copy themselves. Over millions of years, these became simple cells. Eventually, simple cells evolved into bacteria-like organisms. Or later, life evolved from those early primitive cells. The atheists accept this because it does not require God. Some scientists, biologists, believe life began at a chemical level far simpler than that of bacteria. Many scientists believe that bacteria are too complex to have a DNA-based coding system. Membrane, energy cycles, protein factory, ribosomes. Science does not claim that such complexity appeared instantly. What is wrong with such a bacterial model is as follows. First, there is substantial evidence that life existed before bacteria. Second, how did bacteria deep in some ocean manage to ascend to land and survive? Moreover, I will explain many variables that must have been available to ensure the bacteria's survival. Even the simplest cell is far too complicated to arise by chance from random chemicals. DNA contains information. Proteins require precise folding and are organized neatly. Life requires a coordinated system, corroborated support, ratified management, and collective intelligence. This level of harmonized activities, a viable organization, and planning indicates intelligent, fine architectural, and superb design. No experiment has created life from non-life. Scientists have never turned pure chemicals into a living cell. The Miller-Urey experiment demonstrates the building blocks of life, not life itself. Chemical soups degrade, they don't self-organize. In nature, random chemistry tends to break down rather than build complex systems. The most significant gap includes how did non-living chemistry become a self-replicating system? How early did cells form their protective membranes? How did metabolism start? Moreover, a stable energy source was essential. Without it, no life could have existed, including bacteria. But for bacteria to survive, chemical energy, for example, hydrogen, sulfur compounds, iron, and methane, was required. Cyanobacteria use sunlight to produce energy, thereby oxygenating the earth. Liquid water was essential because it enabled molecular motion and chemical reactions. No chemistry of life can function without it. Early bacteria required genetic material such as RNA first, then DNA. ability to copy information, pass it to offspring and to progenies. A protective boundary was a must requirement. A cell membrane made of lipids separates the inside from the outside to regulate nutrients in and waste out and to block harmful substances. Without a protective boundary, life cannot remain organized. Basic metabolism, self-maintenance, chemistry, requirements such as converting energy into usable forms, build and repair their own components, maintain internal balance, homeostasis. To survive for billions of years, early bacteria needed protection from harsh conditions, UV radiation, especially before ozone, extreme heat or freeze, high acidity or salinity. They survive by living underground or underwater, having a DNA repair mechanism, forming biofilms, entering dormant, slumbering states. In summary, the following crucial variables were required: energy source, genetic information system, self-repair, reproduction, information storage, protective membrane, metabolism, environmental shielding, ability to evolve, and error protection. Hence, no metabolism, no repair, no survival, no membrane, no organization, no information, no continuity. This is known as irreducible coordination. Nothing works unless everything works. Chemical reactions follow thermodynamic principles, move toward disorder, entropy, do not preserve information, do not self-replicate, and are not self-aware. Yet life builds order, preserves meaning, genetic code, corrects errors, and resists entropy continuously. Information is not a physical property. DNA is not just matter, it is coded instructions. Matter has mass and energy. Information has meaning. Meaning is not reducible to physics. Every known coded system conveys language, mathematics, software, symbols. They all come from the mind, not a blind process. No experiment has ever shown raw chemistry generating symbolic code. Survival without light implies advanced design. Early bacteria survived without light. Under extreme pressure, in a toxic environment with precisely intelligent chemical cycles. These require exact molecular specificity, regulatory feedback loops, robust error tolerance. These are sophisticated engineering traits, no accident. The atheist claims, given billions of years, anything can happen. But this saying is wrong. Time cannot invent functional systems, generate purpose, create information without a reliable source. 0 multiplied by 0 is still 0. Matter alone explains shape, motion, and reaction. Matter does not explain intention, purpose, meaning, awareness, or direction. The bacteria did not merely survive, they knew how to survive. It was instinctual, as no alternative to a mighty designer could have programmed them. As boundless species are programmed to live by instinct, that knowing is not light, chemistry, or time, it is organization and foresight demanding a fabulous mind. Even the simplest bacteria can sense their environment, move toward nutrients and away from toxins, and communicate quorum sensing, repair themselves, enter dormant states strategically. These are not random reactions. They are goal-oriented directional behaviors. Yet bacteria have no brain, no neurons, no consciousness in the human sense. So, what is guiding these behaviors? Information plus purpose is not a mere matter. Matter explains a structure, not meaning. Atoms explain shape, weight, and bonding. They do not explain why a system preserves itself. Why are errors corrected? Why is information protected? A bacterium treats DNA damage as harmful and repairs it. What is this implicit force in bacteria if not planned instinct? Proceeding to human beings. Consciousness is not an upgrade, it is a revelation. Human consciousness did not appear from nothing. If matter alone were sufficient, all complex systems would be alive, computers would be conscious, stones given enough time would think, but they do not. The continuity problem. Atheists believe that there was a first cell from which bacteria, animals, and humans evolved. But there is no point at which meaning suddenly appears. Purpose suddenly appears. Purpose suddenly emerges, or awareness suddenly switches on. These were always present in seed form. This does not deny science. It explains why science works. As Aquinas said, things that lack intelligence cannot consistently act towards the end unless directed. Becoming aware that the mind is fundamental, not derivative. Moreover, consciousness revealed what was already presented in life. Awareness equals sensitivity. Memory equates to genetic memory. Choice equates adaptive response. Purpose implies survival orientation. Science does not have the answer to these questions and thousands more. Like a dictionary formed from an explosion in a print shop, or a computer formed from random sands, critics adamantly believe that an unguided process cannot produce the code-like structure of DNA. The oceans the non-believers are referring to are too violently fluctuating, with tides and ebb/flood cycles that are very disturbing to allow such complexity to develop. They require a steady, calm environment for it to form. One cannot obtain a digital information system, DNA, from blind chemistry. Constitute a mind, intention, rules, encoding, management, decoding, and purpose. Random chemistry does not create codes. Scientists have tried for years to make a living cell or an amino acid. They cannot make a working self-replicating molecule. In real chemistry, molecules break apart. Water destroys large molecules. Heat accelerates decomposition. The ocean can't randomly assemble a functional protein. It is more likely that a tornado passing through a junkyard assemble a 747 airplane. Even an atheist scientist like Fred Hoyle made this argument. The atheists brag about evolution, but evolution has many irresolvable flaws. concepts that are conflicting and disputable. It cannot explain the start of life. Evolution explains how life changes over time, but it cannot account for life's origin. Hence, atheists must rely on a separate theory, abiogenesis, which is unproven, unobserved, incomplete, and purely speculative. Even if the scientific explanation is incomplete, the atheists prefer to say, "We do not know yet," over grasping that God did it. What is abiogenesis that the atheists talk about so much? The actual claim is as follows: early Earth contained water and simple chemicals. Energy sources, heat, lightning, radiation, caused chemical reactions. These reactions produced organic molecules. Some molecules accidentally became self-replicating, leading to the emergence of primitive cells. Primitive cells evolved into bacteria. All life descended from these first cells. The theory is called abiogenesis. Abiogenesis is not evolution. It is a separate, unresolved, unproven hypothesis. It has never been demonstrated experimentally. The thesis fails to recognize that life is not merely chemistry. A living cell is not simply a mixture of molecules. It is a system. Even the simplest cell conveys a coded information language, DNA, a decoding mechanism, ribosomes, error correction, energy conversion, a boundary, membrane, a purpose-driven process, survival, replication. These are not properties of chemistry alone. They are the hallmarks of engineering and intelligence. Matter can form patterns, but matter cannot write instructions or laws. The information barrier. DNA is not solely a molecule, it is information. Information has peculiar characteristics. It is symbolic, follows rules, conveys meaning, and demands interpretation. No known natural process produces functional information systems empty of intelligence. Every confirmed source of information and knowledge comes from a mind. Despite decades of research, no experiment has ever created life from non-life. No self-replicating system has arisen spontaneously. No genetic code has emerged without intelligent input. Laboratories can synthesize components, but components are not systems. A pile of circuits is not a computer. A pile of chemicals is not life. The odds of forming even one functional protein by chance are astronomically small. When extended to multiple proteins, coordinated teaming, membrane formation, energy systems, replicating accuracy, the probability effectively becomes zero. At this point, the theory survives not on evidence but on insistence. Abiogenesis remains popular not because it is proven, but because it excludes God. Mind before the matter holds that information precedes matter. Order precedes chaos. Intelligence precedes systems. Meaning precedes mechanism. Some of the odd findings that the atheists cling to: They claim that life arose accidentally in ancient oceans is not a scientific conclusion, is a philosophical commitment. Matter organizes itself into purpose. Information can arise without a mind exhausted of intelligence. Life can emerge without intention. Matter can create self-awareness. A perishable matter, as senseless as it is, can create brilliant minds.
This has been Lopsided Minds, a production of Envoy of Lights. The journey continues in Part 2, The Fractured Lens.